The sky over Albuquerque was the color of old steel when they handed Maya the box. Rain again, the kind that didn't clean anything, just made the streets slick and the air heavy with exhaust and wet concrete. She stood under the chipped awning outside the group home while Mr. Foster fumbled with his keys, pretending he wasn't watching her the way social workers always did at moments like this, waiting to see if she'd break or bolt or both. Inside the cardboard were all the things the state had decided she could keep. Birth certificate with no father listed. GED diploma earned at 16 because sitting in another high school wasn't worth the effort. 3 t-shirts that had been washed so many times the logos were ghosts. A paperback mystery novel with a broken spine. A photograph she didn't remember anyone taking, showing her at maybe 5 years old, standing in front of a chain-link fence with a smile that looked like someone had told her to. 19 years reduced to 8 pounds of paper and fabric. The rain soaked through her jacket as Mr. Foster finally got the door open, but he didn't go inside. Instead, he pulled an envelope from his coat pocket, cream-colored and heavy, the kind of paper that announced itself as important. Her name was written across the front in elegant, looping handwriting that belonged to another century. Maya Torres. This came for you a few months ago. His voice was tight, the way it got when protocol said one thing and his conscience said another. Couldn't give it to you until today. Came from a law office up in Red Willow Crossing. She stared at the envelope like it might be one more lie in a lifetime of them. You know anybody there? Never heard of it. Mr. Foster nodded like he'd expected that. It's legit. I checked. Woman named Eleanor Torres had it sent. Says it's about your family. Family. The word people used too easily, like it was a band-aid instead of a wound. Social workers had tossed it around her entire childhood, hoping repetition would make it true. For Maya, it had always been a blank space. No mother who stayed, no father who existed, no cousins or uncles or stories. Just a series of temporary beds in temporary homes with temporary people who looked at her with temporary kindness before the state moved her somewhere else. She took the envelope with fingers that felt too cold. The seal had been sliced open already, Mr. Foster's verification ritual, but the letter inside was still folded, still waiting. I don't know what's in it, he said, but maybe it's something. The bus rumbled in the distance, her ride to whatever came next. She'd saved $347 from under-the-table work at a bodega. It would last maybe 2 weeks if she was careful, less than that if she ate more than once a day. You got a place tonight? Yeah. The lie came automatically. You got my number if you need it? She didn't answer. He looked away. She stepped off the porch without a goodbye. Nobody in her life had stuck around long enough to earn one. The bus stop was 6 blocks away, and the rain picked up as she walked, her sneakers soaking through at the soles. Under a flickering streetlight, she stopped and pulled out the letter. The handwriting matched the envelope, careful and precise, each letter formed like it mattered. My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then I've passed on and you've turned 19. I'm sorry I wasn't there to hold you, to know you. My name is Eleanor Torres. I am your grandmother. The words hit like a fist to the chest. Grandmother, real, a name. Your mother, Grace, was my daughter. She loved you deeply, but her battles were too heavy for her to carry. When you were born, she left you at a hospital, hoping someone would give you a better chance than she could. I didn't know you existed until 3 years ago. I tried to find you, to bring you home, but the system said I was too old, too far away. So I waited and I planned. I'm leaving you the only thing I can. My land. Our family's ranch in Red Willow Crossing. It's not perfect, it's old, worn down like me, but it's yours if you want it. If you don't, I understand. I just needed you to know you came from somewhere. You belong somewhere. You are not a mistake. Maya stood under the streetlight with rain running down her face, reading the words 3 times, 4, trying to make them feel real. A grandmother who'd looked for her, land, a place belonging. At the bottom was a phone number and a name, James Barrett, attorney at law. The bus hissed to a stop down the block, doors opening to the warm interior, and the driver who'd take her north toward nothing in particular. She had a ticket already, purchased that morning when leaving the group home had still felt like falling off a cliff. She looked at the letter again. Red Willow Crossing. New Mexico. 3 hours north by bus, a place she'd never heard of, a grandmother she'd never met, a ranch that was probably as broken as everything else in her life. But for the first time since she could remember, someone had left her something that wasn't a social worker's case file or a box of donated clothes. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number. Barrett answered on the second ring. His voice was warm and cautious at the same time, the voice of a man who'd learned to expect complications. Yes, he'd been Eleanor's attorney. Yes, the property was real. Yes, the inheritance was legitimate. But there were problems. The ranch had $43,000 in back property taxes. She had 6 months to clear the debt or the county would auction it. The house needed work. Significant work. Water system questionable. No livestock. No equipment that ran. "I'm not trying to scare you off," he said, "but I want you to understand what you're walking into. Your grandmother lived on Social Security. She couldn't maintain it. She hoped you'd have better luck." Maya watched the bus pull away without her, its taillights disappearing into the rain. "Can I see it?" "Of course. When can you get here?" "Tomorrow." She spent the night in a 24-hour diner, nursing coffee and using the Wi-Fi to search Red Willow Crossing, population 847, one main street, high desert, cattle country, nearest city 40 miles away. The images showed wide skies and empty land and buildings that looked like they remembered when the West was still being won. The morning bus north ran through landscape that shifted from urban gray to brown desert to red rock mesas. Maya pressed her forehead against the window and watched America change outside the glass, wondering if she was moving towards something or just away from everything else. Red Willow Crossing announced itself with a faded sign and a single stoplight. Main Street had a feed store, a diner, a hardware store with sun-bleached advertisements in the window, and a building that said Barrett and Associates in gold letters that were peeling at the edges. The bus dropped her in front of the diner. She stood on the sidewalk with her cardboard box in a backpack that held everything else she owned, breathing air that smelled like dust and sage and space. A man in his 50s climbed out of a truck parked across the street. He wore jeans and boots and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking like a lawyer who'd learned to dress for his location. His handshake was firm and his eyes kind, but there was caution there too, the same look Mr. Foster had worn, the look of someone who'd seen plans fall apart before. "Maya Torres, I'm James Barrett. Welcome to Red Willow Crossing." Before she could respond, another truck pulled up alongside them. This one was newer, shinier, driven by a man in an expensive Stetson and boots that cost more than Maya had earned in the last year. He climbed out with the confidence of someone who owned most of what he looked at. "Jim." The man nodded at Barrett, then turned to Maya with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be Eleanor's granddaughter. I'm Richard Caldwell. Own most of the valley." He said it like an introduction and a warning at the same time. Barrett's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. Caldwell circled Maya the way a rancher might assess livestock. "That property of Eleanor's has been an eyesore for years. Shame to see it go to waste. I'll give you $25,000 cash, right now, right here. More than that dump is worth." Maya felt Barrett go still beside her. She kept her voice level. "I haven't even seen it yet." "Why bother? Roofs collapsed, wells probably dry, fences are down. Place should have been condemned years ago. Eleanor was a stubborn old woman. Hopefully you're smarter." The contempt in his voice was casual, practiced, the tone of someone who'd never been told no and didn't expect to start hearing it now. Maya had met men like him before in group homes and social services offices, men who thought money and status meant they could say anything to anyone. "I'm going to look at it anyway." Caldwell's smile vanished. "There's reasons that land should have been mine years ago. Ask the old-timers. Your grandmother stole something that didn't belong to her, and everyone in this valley knows it. Don't make her mistake." "That's enough, Richard." Barrett's voice had an edge now. Caldwell ignored him, eyes still on Maya. "Clock's ticking on those taxes, 5.5 months. When you realize you can't afford it, my offer drops to $15,000. After that, I'll wait for the auction and get it for pennies." He climbed back in his truck and drove off, leaving diesel exhaust and the smell of expensive cologne hanging in the desert air. Barrett waited until the sound of the engine faded. "I should have warned you about him." Richard Caldwell owns 3,000 acres surrounding your 160. He's been trying to buy Eleanor's land for 20 years. She refused every offer. Why does he want it so badly? Water rights officially. Your property has year-round creek access. He needs it for development. But there's more to it. Eleanor never told me everything, but she said Caldwell wanted something besides water. Something his family lost a long time ago. They drove 12 miles out of town on a dirt road that turned to washboard after the first 5. Mesas rose on either side, red rocks striped with centuries of wind and rain. The land looked empty until you noticed the cattle grazing in distant pastures, the fence lines running toward horizons that seemed impossibly far away. Eleanor lived out here alone for 40 years, Barrett said. After your mother left, she stayed, refused to give up. Toward the end, she got obsessive about property boundaries, water sources, old surveys. She spent months in the county recorder's office. Whatever she found, it made Caldwell nervous. The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise. Maya's first thought was that grandmother had been generous calling it a ranch. The house was a single-story adobe with a roof that had partially collapsed on the north side. Windows were broken, the front porch oreged like a broken promise, and what had once been white paint was now the color of old bones. A barn leaned to one side, missing boards, missing purpose. Fences ran in lines that no longer held anything back. But the land itself was beautiful. The valley opened up behind the house, a creek running through it with cottonwoods marking its path. Grass grew thick where water reached. The soil looked rich and red and alive. In the distance, mesas rose like cathedrals, and the sky stretched so wide it made Maya's chest hurt. Barrett parked and they climbed out. The silence was enormous, broken only by wind through the cottonwoods and the distant call of a hawk. Maya had lived her entire life surrounded by noise, sirens, and traffic, and people stacked on top of each other in buildings that blocked out the sky. This emptiness felt like drowning and flying at the same time. Main house is 1,200 square feet, needs a new roof, $8,000 at least. Barn's got structural damage. Water well has a pump that hasn't worked in 2 years. Fencing needs 3 miles of replacement. Tractor hasn't run in 5 years. Barrett walked her through it systematically, pointing out rot and rust and failure. The kitchen had 1970s appliances. The bathroom had plumbing that groaned. 2 bedrooms, both with ceilings that showed water damage. But there was also a stone fireplace that looked solid, wood floors that had been beautiful once, and windows that framed views of land that seemed to go on forever. In the master bedroom, a quilt lay across the bed, hand-stitched in patterns that told stories Maya didn't know yet. On the wall hung photographs. Eleanor as a young woman with horses. A little girl with dark braids and Eleanor's eyes, maybe 6 years old, sitting on a fence. The same girl older, maybe 16, standing defiant with her arms crossed. That's Grace, Barrett said quietly. Your mother. Eleanor kept every picture she had. Maya stared at the teenager in the photo and saw her own jaw, her own way of standing like she was ready to fight or run. Her mother. Real. Not just a blank space anymore, but a person who'd lived in this house, who'd left from this porch, who'd made choices that led to Maya standing here looking at her face. What happened to her? Eleanor never said much. Grace left when she was 18, wound up in Albuquerque, got into trouble. Drugs, from what I gathered. By the time Eleanor tracked her down, Grace had already left you at the hospital. Eleanor tried to find you, but the system wouldn't place you with her. Too old, too isolated, no support system. It broke something in her. They walked through the rest of the house. A second bedroom with the door locked. A study also locked, this time with a heavy padlock that looked new compared to everything else. Barrett didn't have keys for either. Eleanor locked those rooms about 6 months before she died. Said they were for you, if you stayed. Outside, they walked the property. The creek ran clear and cold. Maya knelt and put her hand in it, feeling water that had traveled from mountains she couldn't see to land that was somehow hers. The grass was thick despite the neglect. The cottonwoods were old and massive, their roots going deep into soil that remembered when this valley was something else. Legally, the property is yours clear of any liens except the tax debt, Barrett said. $43,000. You have 6 months. If you can't pay, the county auctions it. Caldwell will bid and he'll get it. He's been patient for 20 years. He can wait another 6 months. Maya stood at the edge of the creek and looked back at the house. Broken, failing, impossible. But here, real, hers. What would it take to make this work? Barrett pulled out a notepad, started calculating. Roof repair, minimum 8,000. Water system, 2,500. Electrical upgrade to meet code, another 2,000. Fencing materials, if you do the labor yourself, 4,000. That's just to make it safe and functional. Doesn't include the taxes. So $60,000 total, at minimum, if nothing else breaks, which it will. And I have $347. He didn't try to make it sound better than it was. I'm not trying to discourage you, but I want you to understand the reality. This isn't a fixer-upper project. This is a full renovation on a property that's been neglected for years. Eleanor lived in one corner of the house and used a camp stove when the kitchen gave out. She drew water by hand when the pump died. She survived, but I wouldn't call it living. A truck appeared over the rise, older than Caldwell's but well-maintained. It pulled up and an old man climbed out, lean and weathered, wearing a Marine's cap and boots that had seen decades of work. He moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had been through things and remembered. "Saw your truck, Jim. Figured I'd check on the new owner." His voice was gravel and smoke, but his eyes were sharp and kind. Barrett relaxed, which told Maya something. "Maya Torres, this is Cal Hendricks. He ranches the section east of here. Knew your grandmother for 40 years. Cal's handshake was firm but not crushing, the handshake of someone who didn't need to prove anything. "Eleanor was good people, stubborn as hell, tough as leather. When she found out about you, she spent every day planning how to make this place worth inheriting. Broke her heart when the state wouldn't let her bring you here." Maya found her voice. "Why not?" "Too old by their standards. 73, living alone, no family support. Nearest hospital 40 miles. They said a teenager needed more than she could provide. She fought it for 2 years, but you were already placed in a different system. By the time she found a lawyer who'd take the case, you'd aged out." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage. Cal studied the house, the barn, the fences. His assessment, quiet and thorough. "Place needs work. That's what everyone keeps saying. But it's good land. Water rights are solid. Creek never dries up. Soil's rich. Eleanor grew hay here for 30 years, made a living before her husband died and her health went." He paused, looked at her directly. "Caldwell offer you money yet?" 25,000. Cal's laugh was short and bitter. "He paid Eleanor 100,000. She told him where to put it. Man's been circling this property like a buzzard ever since. You need to understand something. Richard Caldwell owns most of this valley, and he's not used to hearing no. He thinks money and influence mean he gets what he wants. Your grandmother proved him wrong for 4 decades, made him furious. Barrett said there was something else, something besides water." Cal and Barrett exchanged a look. Cal spoke carefully. "Eleanor found something on this land, never told me exactly what, but she spent the last year of her life researching property records, old surveys, water tables. She locked herself in that study for months. Whatever she discovered, it scared Caldwell. He sent his foreman Blake Morrison out here 3 times trying to intimidate her. She met him at the door with a shotgun." Maya felt something shift in her chest. Not fear exactly, but awareness. This wasn't just a broken ranch, it was the center of something unfinished. "If you're thinking about staying," Cal said, "you need to know what you're up against. Caldwell plays dirty. He owns the bank in town, sits on the county commission, has friends in the state capitol. He'll use pressure, legal and otherwise, to get what he wants. Eleanor stood her ground because she was old and didn't care what he did to her. You're 19 and just getting started. Are you telling me to leave? I'm telling you the truth. The choice is yours. But if you decide to stay, I'll help. I owe Eleanor that much. She helped me when I came back from Vietnam and didn't know how to live with myself anymore. Taught me how to work land, how to let it ground you. I'll teach you the same if you want to learn." Maya looked at the house again, the collapsed roof, the broken windows, the enormous silence of empty rooms. She thought about the cardboard box with 8 pounds of belongings, about 19 years of temporary beds in temporary places with temporary people. About Eleanor's letter saying you belong somewhere. I need to think. Fair enough. Cal pulled a card from his pocket, wrote a number on the back. That's my cell. I'm 5 miles east. You need anything day or night, you call. Weather's turning cold. You can't stay here tonight, not without heat or water. Barrett can point you to a motel in town. After they left, Maya stood alone on the property as the sun dropped toward the mesas. Shadows stretched long across the valley. The temperature fell fast, desert night coming with its teeth. She walked through the house again, running her hands along walls that were cold and solid. She opened Eleanor's quilt and wrapped it around her shoulders, smelling dust and lavender and time. In the kitchen, she found cabinets with canned goods, years old but still sealed, a drawer with basic tools, a window over the sink that showed the barn, and beyond it, the valley spreading out like a promise someone had forgotten to keep. She found a camping lantern in the barn, still working, a sleeping bag on a cot, musty but intact. Eleanor had lived her last days in this corner, in this small light, in this massive silence. Maya dragged the cot into the main room, positioned it under the part of the roof that was still solid. She lit the lantern and sat with Eleanor's quilt around her shoulders and Eleanor's letter in her hands. The wind picked up outside, pushing at the walls, whistling through gaps where windows had broken. The house creaked and groaned, settling into the cold. She thought about the bus station, about Mr. Foster's worried face, about group home beds and social workers, and the peculiar loneliness of being surrounded by people who were paid to care. She thought about Caldwell's contempt and Cal's quiet strength and Barrett's careful honesty. And she thought about Eleanor's words. You are not a mistake. You belong somewhere. Maya pulled out a notebook and a pen, started making a list. Roof, water, electricity, fences, each item a small piece of an impossible mountain. She didn't have money, didn't have skills, didn't have any reason to think she could do what Eleanor had spent 40 years failing to maintain. But she had something she'd never had before. She had a name that meant something, a place that came from somewhere, land that ran with water and grass and history. The wind howled, the house held, and in the cold darkness of the desert night, Maya Torres made her decision. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until she understood what Eleanor had protected. Not until she figured out why Caldwell wanted this broken piece of land badly enough to spend 20 years trying to take it. She pulled Eleanor's quilt tighter and watched the lantern cast shadows on walls that were now hers. Tomorrow she'd start figuring out how to survive here. Tonight, she just needed to stay. Dawn came with light that turned the mesas gold. Maya woke to cold that had seeped into her bones and a silence so complete her ears rang. She walked outside and stood in grass wet with dew, watching the sun climb over the landscape that looked like the beginning of the world. Cal's truck appeared at 7, bringing coffee and a thermos and breakfast burritos wrapped in foil. Figured you'd still be here, Eleanor's granddaughter. They sat on the broken porch and ate while Cal pointed out the property's bones, where the fences needed work, where the water system connected, where Eleanor had grown hay for 30 years before the equipment died and her health failed. First thing is water. You can't live here without it. Wells 250 feet deep, pumps burned out. We can hand pump for now. Old mechanisms still there. 45 pulls for 5 gallons. Eleanor did this for 6 months 1 year. You can do it for a few weeks while we figure out the pump. He showed her how. The old manual pump beside the well house, rusty but functional. The rhythm of pulling the handle, feeling resistance, hearing water begin to move far below. The satisfaction when it finally gushed cold and clear into the bucket. Everything else builds from this. Water means you can stay. Staying means you can work. Working means you can fight. They spent the morning assessing the damage. Cal moved through the property like he was reading a map written in rust and rot. He showed Maya how to check fence posts for stability, how to read water stains on wood, how to tell which repairs were urgent and which could wait. Your grandmother had a plan. She left notes in that locked study, spent her final year documenting everything she found. When you're ready to open it, I'll help. But first you need to decide if you're really staying, because once Caldwell knows you're serious, things will get harder. As if summoned, a truck appeared. Not Caldwell's this time, but a newer Ford with a man behind the wheel who looked like he'd learned violence somewhere official and never unlearned it. He parked and climbed out, not quite threatening, but not friendly either. "Blake Morrison. I'm Mr. Caldwell's property manager." He looked around with the same assessment Cal had done, but his eyes were calculating instead of kind. "Checking on you, making sure you're safe out here. A lot of accidents happen to folks who don't know ranching." Cal stepped forward, positioned himself between Morrison and Maya. The air went tight. "She's got help." Morrison smiled without warmth. "Good, she'll need it. Clock's ticking on those taxes. 5.5 months left. Be a shame if something happened to slow down any improvements." He touched his hat, climbed back in his truck. "You take care now." After he left, Cal was quiet for a long time. "That was a warning. Caldwell's putting you on notice. Whatever Eleanor found, whatever she protected, they don't want you finding it too." "What did she find?" "Don't know exactly, but there are markers on this property, old survey stakes that don't match official records. Your grandmother thought someone moved boundary lines years back. If she was right, Caldwell's land claims might not be as solid as he thinks." They worked through the afternoon. Cal taught Maya how to tarp the damaged roof sections, how to check the structural integrity of load-bearing walls, how to test electrical outlets for safety. Every lesson was practical, immediate, the kind of knowledge that meant surviving versus just existing. As the sun dropped, a car appeared. Not a truck this time, but an older sedan that moved slowly, carefully, like the driver wasn't sure of the road or the destination. It stopped near the house and a woman climbed out, thin and careful, moving like someone who expected the world to shift beneath her at any moment. Behind her, a little girl emerged, maybe 7 years old, all dark eyes and curiosity. The woman stood frozen, staring at Maya. And Maya saw it immediately, the resemblance she'd noticed in the photograph. The same jaw, the same way of standing, but older, worn, showing years that had been harder than they should have been. "Maya," the woman's voice broke. "I'm Grace. I'm your mother." The words hung in the desert air. Maya felt Cal step back, giving them space she wasn't sure she wanted. "This is Emma, your half-sister. I've been clean 9 months. Got out of rehab, found steady work, got my life together, enough to try and find you. Mr. Foster told me about the inheritance, about Eleanor." Grace's voice caught. "I didn't know she died. I didn't know she left you this place." Emma peered around Grace's leg, studying Maya with the frank curiosity of children who haven't learned to hide what they're thinking. "You're my big sister? Mama says you live on a ranch now. Can I see the horses?" "There aren't any horses." "But it's a ranch." Emma looked genuinely confused. "Ranches have horses." Grace touched Emma's shoulder. "We should go. I just wanted to see you, to tell you I'm sorry, to see if maybe we could talk sometime. I don't expect anything. I just don't want to be a stranger to you anymore." Maya felt everything inside her go cold and tight. This woman had left her at a hospital when she was 3 days old, had disappeared for 19 years, and now stood here with a child she'd managed to keep, managed to raise, managed not to abandon. But Emma was looking at her with hope and no judgment, and Grace was standing there like she expected to be told to leave and was already preparing for it. Cal cleared his throat. "Sun's going down, gets cold fast. You two need a place to stay tonight?" Grace shook her head quickly. "We have a motel in town. I'm working at the diner there. Got a room behind the restaurant. We're okay. I just wanted Maya to know we're close, if she wants to talk." Emma had already lost interest in the adults and was investigating the yard, poking at rocks and peering into the barn. She bent down and picked up something, came running back. "Look, a brick, a weird one. It was loose in the fireplace." She held it out, and Maya took it automatically. Not a brick exactly, but a piece of adobe that had been carved hollow. Inside, a key wrapped in paper. Maya unfolded it, and Eleanor's handwriting appeared. For Maya. When the wolves circle, remember, water flows uphill in this valley. Find where it starts. Maya looked up, but Emma was already off exploring again, Grace calling her back with the tired patience of single mothers everywhere. "We should go. I just wanted you to know." Grace's eyes were wet. "I wanted you to know I'm here, and I'm sorry for everything." They left as the sun touched the mesas, taillights disappearing down the dirt road. Maya stood holding the key and the note, feeling Cal's presence beside her. You okay? I don't know what I am. That's fair. He took the note, read it, handed it back. Eleanor was trying to tell you something. About the property. About water. The creek that runs through here is the only year-round water source for 5 miles. Caldwell's development depends on water rights. If the source isn't where everyone thinks it is, that changes everything. The temperature was dropping fast. Cal helped her secure tarps, showed her where Eleanor kept propane for a camping stove, made sure she had enough for the night. You've got my number. Anything happens, anything at all, you call. I'll be here in 10 minutes. After he left, Maya walked the property as darkness settled. She tried the key in the locked study door. It fit. The door swung open to reveal a room that looked like a command center for a war. Maps covered every wall, survey documents, water table diagrams, satellite photos, handwritten notes in Eleanor's careful script connecting dates and names and coordinates. And in the center of it all, a map of the valley with Maya's property outlined in red and Caldwell's holdings in blue. But there were other markings too. Original survey points, water flow patterns, a spring marked on Maya's land that wasn't on any official county map. Eleanor's journal sat on the desk, leather-bound and thick. Maya opened to the last entry, dated 3 months before Eleanor died. They stole it in 1952. I have proof now. Caldwell's grandfather moved the survey markers, claimed the spring as his own. The entire development is built on water rights that don't belong to him. If Maya finds this, if she proves it, she'll save this land and everything downstream. But Caldwell will fight. He has to. If the truth comes out, he loses everything. Maya sat in Eleanor's chair, surrounded by 40 years of research, and felt the weight of inheritance shift. This wasn't just broken property. This was evidence. This was a battle Eleanor had fought alone until she couldn't fight anymore. She heard a sound outside, footsteps on gravel. She grabbed Eleanor's shotgun from the corner where Cal had pointed it out earlier and moved to the window. A figure was trying the locked study door from outside, testing the handle. Maya pumped the shotgun, the sound unmistakable in the desert silence. The figure ran. She heard an engine start, saw taillights disappear fast down the road. Her phone rang. Cal. Heard shots. Someone was trying to break in. They're gone now. I'm coming over. He arrived with headlights cutting through darkness. Together they walked the perimeter, found fresh tire tracks, boot prints in the soft earth by the study window. That was Morrison, Caldwell's man. They're not waiting anymore. Cal's face was grim. Whatever Eleanor found in there, they wanted badly enough to risk breaking in. She found proof Caldwell's grandfather stole water rights in 1952. The spring everyone thinks is on Caldwell's land is actually on mine. Cal went very still. You're sure? Eleanor documented everything. Surveys, witnesses, historical records. The spring that feeds Caldwell's entire development is on Torres property, which means his water rights are invalid. Jesus. Cal sat down on the porch steps. That's $50 million in development built on stolen water. If you prove it in court, he loses everything. Eleanor wanted me to find it. And Caldwell will do anything to stop you. Cal looked at her directly. You understand what this means? This isn't about back taxes anymore. This is about destroying a powerful man's empire. He won't let that happen quietly. Maya thought about the cardboard box, about 8 pounds of belongings, about 19 years of nothing that belonged to her. I'm not selling. Didn't think you would. You're Eleanor's granddaughter. Cal stood. Okay, then we fight. But we need to be smart. First thing tomorrow, we take everything in that study to Barrett, get it documented and protected legally. Then we start gathering more evidence, and we prepare for Caldwell to come at you with everything he has. They spent the night securing the house, taking photographs of Eleanor's research, creating backup copies of documents. When the sun rose, they loaded everything into Cal's truck. At 8 in the morning, Richard Caldwell's truck appeared on the road, pulling up fast, dust cloud trailing behind. He climbed out with Blake Morrison and 2 other men Maya didn't recognize, all wearing the kind of casual weapons that said security but meant threat. Caldwell's expensive boots hit the dirt with purpose. I know Eleanor had documents, old surveys, water maps. Hand them over now or this gets complicated. Maya stood on the porch with Cal beside her, Barrett's number already dialed on her phone. This is my property. Get off it. That property should have been mine 30 years ago. Eleanor stole information that wasn't hers. She convinced herself she'd found something, but she was wrong, old and confused and wrong. She found proof your grandfather committed fraud. Caldwell's face went dark. Careful, girl. I already filed paperwork to contest your inheritance. You're 19 years old with no job, no money, no proof you can maintain this property. I'm a respected businessman with deep roots in this valley. When this goes to court, who do you think wins? Morrison stepped forward. Cal shifted, hand moving toward his truck. You have got 48 hours to accept my offer, Caldwell said. After that, I take it through the courts, and you'll end up with nothing. Not even the dignity of walking away with cash in your pocket. He climbed back in his truck. Before leaving, he looked at Maya one more time. Your grandmother was stubborn. It killed her. Don't make the same mistake. They watched him drive away. Cal's jaw was tight. That was a declaration of war. Maya stood in the morning light, feeling the weight of Eleanor's research in Cal's truck, the key in her pocket, the impossible challenge ahead. She had 5.5 months until the tax deadline, $43,000 she didn't have. A powerful enemy with money and influence and no hesitation about destroying her. But she also had Eleanor's proof, Cal's experience, Barrett's legal mind, and land that was worth fighting for. Let's go to town, she said. Time to see what Eleanor really left me. Barrett's office smelled like old paper and strong coffee. He spread Eleanor's research across his conference table while Cal and Maya stood watching, the morning sun cutting through dusty Venetian blinds. Surveys from 1920, water table maps from 1950, a geological report from 1952 with handwritten notes and margins that weren't part of the original document. This is extraordinary. Barrett's voice was quiet with the kind of awe lawyers got when they found something that changed everything. Eleanor spent decades building a case. She documented every water source, every historical boundary marker, every change in county records. And she found the discrepancy. He pointed to 2 maps side by side. The first showed a natural spring located 200 feet inside what was now Torres property. The second, dated 1952 and signed by William Caldwell Sr., showed the same spring magically moved to Caldwell land. It's fraud, clear, documented fraud. The spring that feeds Richard Caldwell's entire development, the water rights that make his resort possible, all of it originates on your property. If we can prove the 1952 survey was falsified, his water rights claims collapse. Can we prove it? Eleanor found the original surveyor's brass marker. According to her notes, it's still buried on your property at the actual spring source. If we locate it and it matches the 1920 coordinates, we have physical evidence. Cal leaned forward. How fast can Caldwell move with his legal challenge? He filed a quiet title action claiming Maya's inheritance is invalid. Court date is scheduled for 60 days out, but I'm filing for expedited hearing based on water rights fraud. If approved, we could be in court within 3 weeks. So we need to find the marker, file our own claim, and survive whatever Caldwell throws at us. Maya felt the weight of it, the impossibility stacked on top of impossibility, and pay $43,000 in taxes. Barrett looked apologetic for adding to the mountain. The door chimed. Grace stood in the entrance with Emma, who immediately ran to the table to stare at the maps with the unfiltered fascination of 7-year-olds who hadn't learned that most adult work was boring. Sorry, I saw Cal's truck. Wanted to make sure everything was okay. Grace's voice was careful, testing whether she was welcome. Emma pressed her nose close to a survey map. Why are there 2 springs? That's silly. There's only 1 spring. That's the question, kiddo. Cal smiled at her. Someone moved it on paper. Can't move water, it goes where it wants. Emma traced a line with her finger. See? It flows down from here. That's how gravity works. Maya watched her half-sister explain hydrology with the absolute certainty of childhood logic, and something in her chest shifted. This little girl shared her blood. shared Grace's eyes, shared some piece of the history that had led to both of them existing. You're right, Maya heard herself say. Water flows downhill. We need to find where it starts. Barrett began organizing copies of documents for the county clerk. Cal made calls to hydrologists he knew from ranching associations. Grace stood uncertain by the door until Emma pulled her to the table, demanding explanations for legal terms she couldn't pronounce. By afternoon, they had a plan. File counterclaims to Caldwell's lawsuit. Request expedited hearing based on water rights fraud. Meanwhile, locate the brass marker using Eleanor's coordinates in modern GPS. Document everything. Build an airtight case before Caldwell could destroy evidence or pressure officials. This is going to get ugly, Barrett warned. Richard Caldwell doesn't lose gracefully. He'll use every connection, every bit of leverage. He might come after your personal history, your ability to manage property, anything he can use. Let him try. Maya surprised herself with the steel in her voice. She'd spent 19 years being told she wasn't good enough, smart enough, wanted enough. One more powerful man dismissing her didn't feel like something new. It felt like something familiar she finally had the tools to fight. They spent the next week in what Cal called controlled chaos. The county inspector, Martinez, scheduled a compliance visit in 30 days. Every violation would be ammunition for Caldwell's lawyers. The house needed to meet minimum habitability standards. The barn couldn't be a structural hazard. The property had to prove Maya could actually live there. Cal arrived each morning at dawn with tools and coffee and the patient competence of someone who'd spent 50 years learning how things worked. He taught Maya carpentry by having her hold boards while he explained why certain joints mattered, then handing her the saw and stepping back to watch her learn through doing. The roof came first. They couldn't afford full replacement, but they could patch the worst sections. Cal hired Carlos Ruiz, a roofer who'd worked with Eleanor years back. The three of them spent 4 days on that roof in New Mexico's sun, replacing sheathing, laying new shingles, sealing around the chimney and vents. Maya learned to walk on angled surfaces without falling, learned to judge which boards would hold weight and which would betray her, learned that her hands could blister and callous and keep working anyway. Each morning she climbed up scared and climbed down less scared until the 4th day when she realized the fear had transformed into something else. Not confidence exactly, but competence. The knowledge that she could do hard things if she stopped asking whether she was capable and just did them. Carlos watched her nail down the final section. You learn faster than my apprentices, most of them afraid of heights their whole first month. You just decided not to be. Didn't decide anything, just didn't have a choice. That's when you find out what you're made of, when there's no choice left. They moved to the electrical system next. Tom Warwick, a licensed electrician Cal vouched for, spent 2 days rewiring circuits that had been dangerous for years. Maya worked as his assistant, learning to identify which wires were live, how to install GFCI outlets in wet areas, why grounding mattered. Tom explained it like he was teaching someone who'd need to maintain it themselves, not just pass an inspection. This panel is your heart. Everything flows from here. You treat it with respect, it'll keep you safe. You get lazy, house burns down. He showed her how to read the breakers, how to troubleshoot when circuits failed, how to check for shorts without electrocuting herself. By the end, she could wire a basic outlet and understood the logic of how electricity moved through a building. You've got aptitude for this, Tom said, signing off on his work. Ever think about trade school? I'm thinking about surviving the next few months. Fair enough. But after that, you want to learn more. I could use help. Pays decent. The offer hung in the air like possibility. Maya filed it away with other futures she might have if she survived the present. Between repairs, they hunted for the brass marker. Eleanor's notes gave coordinates, but GPS only got them within a 20-foot radius. Emma appointed herself chief excavator, digging test holes with the serious determination of children who thought physical effort could solve any problem. Grace brought lunch each day, sandwiches and water, and awkward attempts at conversation that Maya mostly deflected. But Emma was harder to deflect. She asked endless questions about the ranch, about Eleanor, about why Maya lived alone when she could live with them in town. Her curiosity was without judgment, just pure wanting to understand how the world fit together. On the 5th day of searching, Emma's shovel hit something that rang metallic. She dropped to her knees, digging with her hands, pulling up dirt until brass glinted in the afternoon sun. The marker was stamped with coordinates and a date, 1920, Township Survey. Cal checked the GPS. Perfect match to Eleanor's calculations. 207 feet inside Torres' property boundaries. The spring source Caldwell claimed as his own was legally Maya's. We need to document this before anyone knows we found it. Cal photographed the marker from every angle, recorded the GPS coordinates, took soil samples to prove it hadn't been moved. This is our ace, but we don't play it until the right moment. They reburied it carefully, memorizing landmarks. An old oak with a split trunk, a rock formation shaped like a broken tooth, the way the land dipped just before the hidden spring emerged. Grace watched Maya mark the location on a private map. You're really going to fight him. Richard Caldwell, a man who owns half the valley. I'm really going to fight him. Why, you could take his money, start over somewhere easier, somewhere you don't have to work this hard just to survive. Maya looked at her mother, this woman who'd run from hard things her entire life and was still learning how to stop running. Because Eleanor didn't run. She stayed for 40 years knowing what it would cost. I've got 6 months. I can stay that long. What if you lose? Then I lose, but at least I'll know I tried. Emma appeared between them, covered in dirt, holding up a piece of broken pottery. Look what I found. Is it treasure? It's a shard from an old jug, probably from when Eleanor's husband ran cattle here in the 60s. Cal examined it gently. Not treasure, but its history. Proof people built a life here. That's treasure, Emma was adamant. History's the best kind. The county inspector arrived on day 29. Martinez walked the property with a clipboard and the wary professionalism of someone who'd seen every kind of desperation people could build. He tested electrical outlets, checked the roof repair, examined the water system Cal had fixed, installing a new pump with money borrowed from Rita at the feed store. Substantial improvements. His pen moved across the inspection form. Roof safe, electrical meets code. Water system functional. Barn still needs work, but it's one an immediate hazard. He looked up at Maya. You actually staying here, or just making it pretty enough to sell? I'm staying. Caldwell's not going to like that. I've noticed. Martinez signed the approval form. For what it's worth, Eleanor was good people. Stubborn, but good. This valley could use more people like her. The legal approval bought time, but it didn't slow Caldwell's pressure. 4 months left until the tax deadline, but first they had to survive the court hearing in 3 weeks. Rita called to say the bank had reviewed Maya's line of credit and decided it was too risky. The feed store could no longer extend terms. Everything was cash up front now. 3 days later, the property's water wells was contaminated with diesel fuel. Someone had poured it directly into the well casing overnight. The cost to clean and re-drill, $12,000 Maya didn't have. Cal raged quietly, the dangerous kind of anger that came from men who'd learned violence in war and knew exactly how much damage they could do. This is Morrison. Caldwell's playing dirty now. They reported it to the sheriff. Deputy Cole took statements with the enthusiasm of someone who already knew nothing would come of it. Unless you got evidence, witnesses, security footage, there's not much I can do. Could have been teenagers, could have been anyone, but they both knew it wasn't anyone. Grace showed up that evening with Emma and 2 suitcases. We're staying here. You shouldn't be alone with Morrison circling. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. You're my daughter. Even if you don't want me to be your mother, I'm still responsible for keeping you safe. Emma had already claimed a bedroom, the smaller one with windows facing east. She was arranging her stuffed animals on the bed with the seriousness of someone making a permanent home, not just visiting. Maya found her voice. Why now? Why do you want to be part of this now? Grace sat on the porch steps, looking out at land she'd grown up on and run from 38 years ago. Because I'm tired of running. Because Emma deserves better than a mother who disappears when things get hard. Because you're fighting for something that matters. And I want to be the kind of person who stays for the fight. She pulled out her phone, showed Maya a photo. Eleanor, younger but still old, standing in front of this house with her arms crossed and a smile that said she'd survived things that should have killed her. Mom took this 2 years before she died. She sent it to me through the rehab center. Wrote on the back, Grace, I'm still here, still waiting, still hoping you'll come home. I threw it away, told myself she was trying to guilt me, but the truth is she never gave up on me. Not once in 20 years of me being a complete disaster. Maybe it's time I stopped giving up on myself. Emma appeared in the doorway. Mama, can we stay, please? I like it here. It's quiet and there's space and Maya needs help finding more treasure. The decision was made before Maya could protest. Grace and Emma stayed. The house that had felt empty and haunted started to feel like something else. Something that might become home if it survived long enough. They settled into rhythms. Cal arrived at dawn with work plans. Grace cooked breakfast, insisting everyone eat real food instead of just coffee and determination. Emma explored, finding treasures in the barn and creekside, cataloging them with the seriousness of museum curators. Maya worked until her body demanded rest, then worked more. At night, they sat on the porch while Emma slept, and Grace talked about growing up here, about Eleanor teaching her to ride when she was Emma's age, about summer storms and winter snows and the particular silence of desert nights, about leaving at 18 because the valley felt too small, too known, too limiting, about Albuquerque and drugs and how fast a life could unravel when you thought you were finally free. I was 19 when I got pregnant with you. Homeless, using, completely lost. Leaving you at that hospital was the only good decision I made in 5 years. I told myself you'd be adopted by some nice family, that you'd have the life I couldn't give you. She laughed bitterly. I didn't know you'd spend 19 years in foster care. Didn't know Eleanor was looking for you. Didn't know anything except that I couldn't be what you needed. Maya didn't forgive her. Couldn't forgive her yet. But she started to understand the difference between abandonment born from cruelty and abandonment born from desperation. Started to see Grace not as the villain of her origin story, but as another person who'd been broken and was learning slowly how to mend. Cal brought news on day 42. Barrett got the expedited hearing approved, courts in 3 weeks exactly. Judge saw the water rights evidence and agreed this can't wait 60 days. They spent evenings preparing. Barrett needed Maya to testify to prove she was competent and capable despite her age and history. Cal coached her on how to answer questions without giving ammunition to Caldwell's team. Grace helped her practice staying calm when lawyers tried to rattle her. Emma mostly played, but sometimes she listened with the intensity of children who understood more than adults assumed. One night she climbed into Maya's lap unprompted. You're brave. Braver than anyone I know. I'm not brave, I'm just stubborn. Mama says that's the same thing. Being brave is just being too stubborn to quit. The night before the hearing, someone set fire to the barn. Maya woke to orange light and smoke and Emma screaming. She grabbed Emma and ran outside to find the old structure fully engulfed, flames reaching 30 feet into the night sky, heat so intense it felt like standing next to the sun. Grace emerged from the house, coughing, pointing at the barn. All the documents, Eleanor's research, everything's in there. Maya's heart stopped. They'd moved the original papers there for safety, thinking the house was too vulnerable. Now all of Eleanor's 40 years of work was turning to ash. She started running toward the barn. Cal's truck appeared out of nowhere, headlights cutting through smoke. He saw what she was doing and yelled something she couldn't hear over the roar of fire. Then Emma was running past her, small and determined, heading straight for the barn door. Grace screamed her name. Maya caught up, grabbed Emma around the waist, but the little girl was fighting her with surprising strength. The metal box! The brass marker! It's in there! Cal appeared beside them, already wet from the creek, a bandana over his face. He looked at Maya once, nodded, and ran into the burning barn, 20 seconds that felt like 20 hours. He emerged with the metal box, clothes smoking, eyebrows singed, coughing hard enough to bring up blood. The barn collapsed inward with a sound like the world ending. Flames shot higher. In the distance, sirens finally approached, volunteer fire department responding too late to save anything. Emma clung to Cal, crying. Grace held them both. Maya stood with the metal box in her hands, feeling the warmth of brass through metal, through paper, the last physical evidence that could prove Eleanor's case. The fire marshal arrived at dawn. His investigation took 20 minutes. Accelerant used, gasoline by the smell, Someone poured it along the walls and lit it. This was arson, no question. Deputy Cole took statements with marginally more interest than before. Rita appeared with coffee and the news that her husband's security camera, positioned to watch the feed store's back lot, had caught a truck on the road around 2 a.m. The angle was wrong for plates, but the make and model matched Blake Morrison's Ford. I'll bring him in for questioning. Cole's tone suggested he didn't expect much to come from it. Morrison was arrested by noon and released by 2 p.m. on Caldwell's lawyers say so. The official story, he'd been home all night, his wife confirmed it. No proof otherwise, except grainy footage that could have been any truck. But the damage was done. The barn was gone. Most of Eleanor's paper research was destroyed. All they had left was the brass marker, the GPS coordinates, and photographs Cal had taken weeks earlier. Barrett called. This actually helps us. Caldwell's getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. The fire proves he's scared of what we'll present in court. Unless it scares the judge into ruling in his favor, he's showing what he's willing to do. Or showing that he's willing to commit crimes to protect a fraud. Trust me, this changes the optics. The hearing happened in the county courthouse, a building that had seen better decades and showed its age in cracked linoleum and water-stained ceilings. Judge Thompson presided with the careful neutrality of small-town officials who knew everyone and owed everyone something. Caldwell sat at the plaintiff's table with 2 lawyers in suits that cost more than Maya's entire inheritance. Blake Morrison sat behind them, bandaged from where fire had caught him, giving him an alibi wrapped in injury. Barrett presented their case with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent weeks preparing for this exact moment. He showed the 1920 survey, the 1952 survey with changed coordinates, the brass marker found at the original location, testimony from a hydrologist confirming the spring source was on Torres property, Cal's statement about witnessing the 1952 survey when he was 15, seeing William Caldwell Sr. pay the surveyor to move markers. The courtroom went very quiet during that testimony. Cal spoke without drama, just stating facts the way Marines learn to report observations. He'd been there. He'd seen it. He'd been too young to understand what it meant, but he understood now. Caldwell's lawyers attacked his memory, his motivation, his relationship with Eleanor. But Cal didn't waver. I know what I saw. I've lived with that knowledge for 57 years. Eleanor figured it out. That's why she spent her last decade documenting everything. That's why Maya's standing here today. Judge Thompson called a recess. When they returned, his expression had shifted into something Maya couldn't read. He reviewed the evidence again, asked questions that suggested he was actually thinking instead of just performing the ritual of law. Finally, he spoke. I'm ruling that the 1952 survey contains material discrepancies that warrant further investigation. The water rights claim based on that survey is suspended pending resolution. Ms. Torres retains her property. Mr. Caldwell's quiet title action is denied. The arson investigation into the barn fire will be expedited with state assistance. He looked at Caldwell directly. I'm also issuing a restraining order. You, Mr. Caldwell, and your employees are to stay 500 feet from Ms. Torres and her property except for legally necessary business. Any violations will result in contempt charges. The gavel fell. Maya felt something release in her chest that she hadn't known was clenched. Not victory, not yet, but survival. Space to breathe. Outside, press swarmed, local reporters who'd caught wind that something big was happening. A David and Goliath story playing out in a valley most of America would never hear about. Maya gave one statement. My grandmother spent 40 years protecting this land. I'm just finishing what she started. Caldwell pushed through the crowd without comment, but his face told the story. Rage and fear and the particular fury of powerful men who'd just been told no by someone they'd dismissed as irrelevant. That night, Grace made dinner, while Emma set the table with the seriousness of someone performing an important ritual. Cal joined them, along with Barrett and Rita, and they sat around the table in a house that was starting to feel permanent. To Eleanor, Cal raised his glass, who was too stubborn to die quietly. To Maya, Barrett added, whose proving stubbornness is hereditary. Emma held up her juice box. To treasure hunting and finding the truth. They ate and talked and planned the next steps. The fight wasn't over. Caldwell would appeal, would look for other angles, would use every connection he had, but the momentum had shifted. The land was secure for now. The water rights case would take months to fully resolve. But the evidence was strong enough that Caldwell's development was effectively frozen. Later, after everyone left and Emma was asleep, Maya and Grace sat on the porch under stars that looked close enough to touch. The smell of burned wood still hung in the air from the barn, but underneath it was sage and growing things and the particular scent of desert after dark. "You're really staying." Grace said it like a revelation instead of a question. "I'm really staying." Eleanor would be so proud. "I wish I'd met her. I wish she'd lived long enough to see this." Grace was quiet for a long time. "She did see it, maybe not literally, but she knew. When she wrote that letter, when she left you this place, she knew you'd be exactly the person she needed you to be. Strong enough to stay, stubborn enough to fight, brave enough to choose something hard because it mattered. I'm not any of those things. I'm just too tired of running." Sometimes that's the same thing. Sometimes the bravest choice is just refusing to quit when quitting would be so much easier. They sat in the darkness, two women separated by 19 years and a lifetime of mistakes, learning how to occupy the same space without old wounds taking up all the air between them. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a start, and starting was all Maya had ever needed to do. The settlement came through in pieces over 3 weeks. Caldwell's insurance paid $65,000 for the barn fire after the state investigation confirmed arson and Morrison's involvement. Caldwell himself, facing federal fraud charges for the water rights manipulation, offered $85,000 to avoid further criminal exposure. Barrett negotiated it with the cold precision of someone who knew exactly how much leverage they had and wasn't afraid to use it. Maya sat in Barrett's office staring at numbers that didn't feel real. $150,000. More money than she'd imagined having in a lifetime. The tax debt could be paid with room left over for repairs, operations, a cushion against disaster. She kept waiting for someone to tell her it was a mistake, that poverty was her natural state, and this was just temporary elevation before gravity pulled her back down. "It's real." Barrett slid the settlement documents across his desk. "Caldwell's lawyers wanted confidentiality clauses, non-disclosure agreements. I told them to go to hell. The water rights case is public record now. His grandfather's fraud is documented. The truth doesn't need to hide." "What happens to him?" "Federal charges for falsifying government documents, conspiracy to commit fraud, probably obstruction for the barn fire once Morrison testifies against him. He's looking at 5 to 10 years, plus disgrace. His development company's already in bankruptcy." Partners pulled out the day after the hearing. Richard Caldwell built an empire on stolen water, and watching it crumble is going to be spectacular. The first check she wrote was to the county tax assessor. $43,000, certified funds, hand-delivered by Barrett with copies for 3 separate filing systems. The clerk stamped it, paid with the mechanical efficiency of bureaucracy, but Maya felt the weight lift like she'd been holding her breath for months and finally remembered how to exhale. 4 months, 2 weeks to spare, Barrett noted. Eleanor would have cut it closer. Eleanor didn't have insurance money from arson and a settlement from a desperate criminal. Fair point, but she'd still be proud you paid it in full instead of negotiating for less. The vindication felt distant, abstract. Maya had spent so much energy focused on survival that victory hadn't prepared her for what came after. The immediate threats were gone. Caldwell couldn't touch her anymore. The land was secured. She could breathe without wondering when the next disaster would hit. But breathing without disaster just meant facing different questions. What did she actually want? Who did she want to become? The ranch was hers, legally and financially, but wanting it and knowing what to do with it were different problems entirely. Cal found her that evening, sitting on the foundation where the barn had stood, watching the sun drop behind the mesas. He settled beside her with the comfortable silence of someone who understood that sometimes presence mattered more than words. "You're wondering what comes next. I've spent 2 months just trying to survive. Now that I can actually stay, I don't know what staying means. Means you build something. Ranch doesn't run itself. Land needs purpose or it goes back to being desert. Eleanor grew hay, kept cattle, made a living until her body quit on her. You could do the same, or something different, but you gotta decide what you're fighting for, not just what you're fighting against." Emma appeared from the house carrying a notebook and markers, settling on Maya's other side to draw with the focus children applied to projects adults had forgotten to take seriously. She sketched the ruins of the barn, adding colors that didn't exist in the charred wood, transforming destruction into something imaginary and beautiful. I'm drawing the new barn. It's going to be red with white trim and a weather vane shaped like a horse. She looked up at Maya with absolute certainty. We need horses. Every ranch needs horses. Horses cost money. You have money now. Mama said the bad man had to pay for burning things. That means we can fix things and make them better than before. The logic was sound in the way child logic often was, cutting through complexity to reach simple truths adults overcomplicated. The barn needed rebuilding. The ranch needed animals. Life needed moving forward instead of just holding ground. Grace called them for dinner. She'd been cooking real meals every night, practicing domesticity like a skill she'd let atrophy and was slowly relearning. Tonight was chicken and vegetables from the garden Emma had insisted on planting, food grown from soil they were learning to trust. They ate at a table Grace had found at a yard sale and refinished herself, sitting in chairs that didn't match but held weight without complaint. This gathering that had started as temporary was becoming something permanent without anyone formally deciding. Emma's toys lived in the small bedroom. Grace's clothes hung in the closet of what had been Eleanor's room. They'd stopped talking about going back to town, and Maya had stopped suggesting they should. I saw a job posting. Grace's voice was careful, testing. The elementary school needs a teacher's aide. 22 hours a week, benefits after 90 days. It's not much, but it's close and the hours work with the Emma's schedule. You should apply. I don't have a degree, just GED and rehab certificates. So did I. Didn't stop me from inheriting a ranch and beating Richard Caldwell in court. Grace laughed, surprised. That's fair. Okay, I'll apply. Maybe if we're both working, we can help with ranch expenses. Pay you rent or something. We'll figure it out. Right now, I just want to see if we can survive a year without everything catching fire. Emma looked up, alarmed. Nothing else is going to burn, right? We fixed it. The bad man is gone. We're safe now. The absolute faith in her voice was heartbreaking. Maya wanted to promise safety, to guarantee that threats were finished and security permanent. But she'd learned in 19 years of foster care that promises were just words until time proved them true. We're safer than we were. That's the best I can promise. That's enough. Safer is good. Emma returned to her dinner with the resilience of children who adapted to whatever adults provided and kept moving forward. The next morning, Maya drove to the feed store with a list Cal had helped her compile. If the ranch was going to produce income, it needed inputs first: seed for hay planting, fencing materials for pasture repair, irrigation supplies for water management. Rita met her at the counter with the same cautious optimism she'd shown since the court victory. Heard about the settlement, heard Caldwell's going down hard. She rang up the purchases without commenting on the total, which had grown substantial now that money existed to spend. You staying then? Really staying? Seems like it. Good. This valley could use more people who fight for things. Too many just take what they're given and complain when it's not enough. Eleanor was a fighter. Glad her granddaughter is too. Maya loaded the truck bed with supplies that felt like investment instead of expense. Each bag of seed represented potential harvest. Each fence post was a boundary that would hold something valuable inside. The weight of possibility was heavier than the weight of desperation had been. Cal met her back at the ranch with a plan scratched out on notebook paper. 60 acres could be planted in alfalfa if they work fast. First cutting would come in 90 days, 3 cuttings a year if managed properly. At current market rates, $15,000 profit after expenses. Add leasing grazing rights to a neighboring rancher for another $5,000 annually. The numbers added up to sustainability, to life built on labor and land, and faith that weather would cooperate. It's hard work, dawn to dusk during growing season. Machinery breaks, weather kills crops, prices fluctuate. Eleanor did it for 30 years and stayed broke most of them. But she also stayed independent. Nobody owned her. That's worth something. They spent April preparing fields. Cal taught Maya to drive the old tractor they'd resurrected with parts and patience, showing her how to feel the machine's rhythm, how to read soil moisture by watching how the blade cut. She learned to disc harrow in straight lines, creating seed beds that would either produce or not based on how well she judged depth and spacing. Emma helped where she could, riding along on planting runs, asking questions Cal answered with the patience of men who'd learned teaching was just another form of labor. Grace took the job at the elementary school and came home tired but purposeful, talking about children who reminded her why staying sober mattered. They fell into rhythms that felt like family, even though they didn't call it that. Morning coffee before work. Emma's homework at the kitchen table while Maya and Grace cooked dinner. Evening walks to check irrigation. Small ceremonies of domesticity that added up to something larger than their individual pieces. The alfalfa sprouted in neat rows across the 60 acres, green fuzz that grew bolder each day. Maya checked it obsessively, watching for disease or pest damage, learning to read the health of plants the way Cal read weather in the sky. When the first cutting came, they hired local help and spent 3 days mowing, raking, baling, stacking. 100 tons of hay that buyers contracted immediately at prices that made the labor worthwhile. The check from the hay broker was $26,000. Maya stared at it like a test she'd passed without realizing she'd been taking one. Cal had been right. The land could provide if you understood what it needed and didn't ask for more than it could give. She paid back Rita for the feed store credit, paid Cal for the well pump and countless hours of teaching, put money in savings for Emma's future education. The remaining balance went into ranch improvements, new roof sections, bathroom plumbing that didn't groan, kitchen appliances from this century, windows that sealed properly against winter. By autumn, the house looked like something people might actually choose to live in instead of somewhere they survived while looking for better options. Grace painted the exterior a soft cream that matched the adobe. Emma planted flowers that would bloom in spring. Maya fixed the front porch so it no longer sagged. Replacing boards, Cal showed her how to cut and level. The changes were physical, but they reflected something internal too. Maya was building instead of just reacting. Grace was present instead of disappearing. Emma was thriving instead of just coping. The ranch was becoming home because they were choosing to make it one. Winter brought different work: equipment maintenance, fence repair before spring calving season, planning for next year's crops. Grace's job went permanent with benefits. Emma made friends at school and invited them over to see the ranch, showing off chickens and explaining alfalfa growth cycles with the authority of someone who'd lived it. Maya turned 20 in January. Cal brought out a cake. Barrett sent a card. Rita organized a small gathering at the feed store because apparently she'd been telling everyone about the foster kid who beat Richard Caldwell and was making Eleanor's ranch work again. Maya stood among near strangers who treated her like she belonged and realized that belonging wasn't something you inherited. It was something you built through showing up and staying and proving you were worth including. In February, Caldwell's lawyer called. The man's voice was professionally neutral, stripped of the contempt his client had shown. Richard Caldwell wanted to buy the property, not as intimidation this time, but as surrender. His legal troubles were mounting, his financial empire was collapsing. He needed to liquidate assets, and the water rights case would be easier to close if he owned the property his fraud had tried to claim. $425,000. Final offer, more than fair market value. You could walk away wealthy, start over anywhere you wanted. College, travel, whatever life you want instead of ranching. Maya asked for time to think. The lawyer gave her 48 hours. She spent that night on the porch wrapped in Eleanor's quilt, watching stars that didn't care about property lines or court cases or choices that would determine her entire future. $425,000 was generational wealth for someone who'd started with 8 pounds in a cardboard box. It was security, education, freedom from labor that wore down bodies and spirits, a chance to discover who she might become without this land defining her. But it was also walking away from what she'd fought for. From the graves of ancestors she was just learning to claim. From soil she'd worked, and water she'd protected, and battles she'd won by refusing to quit when quitting would have been infinitely easier. Emma found her near midnight, padding out in pajamas and Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit. Can't sleep, too much thinking. Me too. You're deciding if we have to leave, aren't you? I heard Mama on the phone. Someone wants to buy our house. It's a lot of money, Em, enough to change everything. But we already changed everything. We fixed the house and grew hay and won in court. We're doing good here. Why would we leave when things are finally good? The question held the simple logic children wielded like weapons against adult complexity. They were doing good here. The ranch was working. The family was healing. Why leave? Because leaving was easier. Because staying meant more years of hard work with no guarantee it wouldn't all fail anyway. Because Maya had spent 19 years learning that nothing good lasted, and maybe it was smarter to take the money and run before the universe remembered she wasn't supposed to have nice things. But staying also meant something. It meant refusing to believe that her life was something that happened to her instead of something she built. It meant choosing difficulty because the difficulty mattered. It meant becoming the kind of person who didn't quit just because quitting was available. I don't want to leave. Emma's voice was small. I like my school. I like my room. I like watching the alfalfa grow. I like being somewhere that's ours. It's not yours, Em. It's mine, legally. But it feels like ours, you and Mama and me. Don't we get to decide together? Grace appeared in the doorway, backlit by kitchen light. Emma, you should be asleep. Let Maya think. I can think better when everyone's here. We're a family. Families decide things together. The word hung between them. Word hung. Family. The thing Maya had never had. The thing Grace had run from. The thing Emma claimed with the confidence of someone who hadn't learned to doubt it yet. Grace sat down, pulling Emma into her lap. Maya, whatever you decide, we'll figure it out. If you want to sell, we'll find another place. If you want to stay, we'll keep helping. But this is your land, your choice. Don't let us make you responsible for what we need. What do you want? I want to not screw this up. I want to be sober next year and the year after. I want Emma to have stability. I want you to have the life you deserve, whatever that looks like. But mostly I want to stop running from things that are hard. I've been running my whole life. It hasn't made anything better. Maya looked out at land she'd worked and fought for and learned to read like language. The mesas were dark shapes against darker sky. The creek ran invisible but audible, water moving through the valley the way it had for millennia before anyone tried to claim it. The house behind them was warm and solid and smelled like home in ways the group home never had. Eleanor's letter was in her pocket, edges soft from repeated handling. You belong somewhere. You are not a mistake. Staying wouldn't be easy. The ranch would demand everything she had and more. Weather would fail. Equipment would break. Markets would fluctuate. There would be years of barely making it and years of not making it at all. Nothing was guaranteed except the certainty that walking away was simpler. But simple wasn't the same as right. And easy had never taught her anything except how to survive. Maybe it was time to learn something else. Maybe it was time to learn how to live. She called the lawyer at dawn. Tell Caldwell the land's not for sale. Not now, not ever. There was a pause, the sound of expensive legal counsel recalibrating. You're certain? This is an extraordinary offer. I'm certain. The land stays with the family. That's what Eleanor wanted. That's what I want. He won't be pleased. He's going to prison. He'll survive being disappointed. She hung up before he could argue, feeling lighter than she had in months. The decision was made. She was staying. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. The difference mattered more than she could articulate. Cal arrived for morning work, and Maya told him. His only response was a nod and a slight smile, like he'd expected nothing else. Good. Land needs people who'll commit to it. Eleanor knew that. Now you do too. They spent the day clearing irrigation ditches, preparing for spring planting. The work was repetitive and exhausting, and exactly what Maya needed. Physical labor that left no room for second-guessing. Dirt under fingernails and aching muscles in the particular satisfaction of fixing small things that added up to functional systems. Grace got the teaching job made permanent. Emma's grades put her on the honor roll. The second year's hay crop projected even better than the first. Life moved forward in small increments that felt revolutionary to someone who'd never had increments to measure. Spring came with storms and mud and new grass pushing through last year's stubble. They planted the 60 acres again, added 20 more in rotation, bought 3 heifers from Cal's herd to start building livestock. Emma named them all and treated them like pets until Cal explained that ranchers didn't get attached to things they might eventually sell. The property transformation was gradual but undeniable. What had been broken and abandoned looked maintained, productive, alive. People driving past could see someone was working the land instead of just letting it return to dust. The valley noticed. Other ranchers stopped by with advice. Rita kept track of Maya's operation like it was community investment. Even Barrett mentioned using the case as an example of what happened when ordinary people refused to accept that power was permanent. On the one-year anniversary of Maya's arrival, they held a small ceremony. Barrett and Rita and Cal and a dozen neighbors Maya was learning to know. They unveiled a stone marker near the spring source, brass survey marker mounted in concrete with a plaque that read, Eleanor Torres Memorial. She protected this water and this land for future generations. Cal spoke about Eleanor's stubbornness and strength. Barrett talked about justice delayed but not denied. Rita mentioned community and commitment in choosing to stay when leaving was easier. Then Maya stood up, not because she'd planned a speech, but because words needed saying. A year ago, I had 8 pounds of stuff in a cardboard box. Eleanor left me land I'd never seen in a fight I didn't understand. Everyone told me to walk away, take the money, start over somewhere easier. But Eleanor didn't leave me land to sell. She left me a place to belong. And I'm grateful that she waited, that she believed I'd come, that she knew I'd stay. Her voice caught. Emma took her hand. Grace squeezed her shoulder. The gathering stood in desert afternoon, acknowledging that sometimes the smallest victories were the ones that mattered most. One girl staying on one ranch in one valley most of America would never hear about. But staying when leaving was simpler. Building when destruction was easier. Choosing the hard thing because the hard thing was right. Afterward, Cal taught Emma how to properly set fence posts. Barrett discussed expanding the ranch's legal water rights. Rita brought seeds for a garden that would feed them through summer. People helping people because that's what communities did when you proved you were worth helping. Months passed in the rhythm of ranch work. Spring planting, summer irrigation, fall harvest, winter maintenance. Grace reached 18 months sober and started leading support groups at the County Recovery Center, teaching others what she learned about staying when everything in you screamed to run. Emma grew taller, more confident, a child who knew her home was permanent instead of just temporary shelter until adults decided differently. Maya learned to read the land the way Eleanor had. Which fields would flood in heavy rain? Where morning frost hit hardest? How to judge when cutting hay by listening to the way wind moved through seed heads. The knowledge came slowly, built on failures and small success and Cal's patient teaching. She wasn't Eleanor yet, might never be, but she was becoming someone who knew how to work land and honor legacies and choose difficulty because difficulty built strength. The third summer they added horses, just 2, an older gelding Cal vouched for, and a younger mare with good bones. Emma, now 10 and confident in ways her 7-year-old self hadn't been, learned to ride the way Maya had learned to ranch, through doing instead of just watching. Grace documented it all in photographs, building an album of a life that was ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. Caldwell went to prison in July, 12 years for fraud, conspiracy, obstruction. The news barely registered. He was past tense now, a problem solved, a threat neutralized. His development company was liquidated, land sold to conservation groups and small ranchers who'd been priced out before. The valley changed hands back to people who'd work it instead of just extract value and leave. Maya stood on her porch one evening in August, watching the sun paint the mesas orange and gold. The house behind her was full of noise, Emma singing off-key while setting the table, Grace laughing at something on the radio, life happening in ordinary ways that had once felt impossible to imagine. The ranch was paid for, the taxes were current, the bank account held enough to survive bad years. Equipment worked, fences held. Water flowed from the spring Eleanor had protected through 40 years of stubborn refusal to quit. The land was producing, the family was healing. Small victories that added up to something that felt like winning. Cal's truck appeared on the ridge right on time for dinner. He'd eat with them, then stay for evening work, teaching Maya equipment maintenance the way he'd taught her everything else. Through demonstration and practice and patience for the inevitable mistakes, they gathered around the table. These people who'd become family through choice instead of blood. Not perfect. Still learning how to forgive old wounds and trust future promises. But showing up, staying, building something that might last if they kept choosing each other through the hard seasons. Emma said grace the way the elementary school had taught her, adding her own ending, and thank you for this house and this ranch and all of us being together. Amen. They ate and talked and planned tomorrow's work. Maya looked around the table at faces that had been strangers and were now home, at walls that had been falling and now stood firm, at a life that had been cardboard box temporary and was now rooted in soil and water and choice. The land doesn't need saving, she thought. It just needed someone to stay. And I did. Outside, the desert night settled in with stars and silence and the sound of water moving through darkness toward morning. Inside, Maya Torres sat with her family and understood that belonging wasn't something you inherited or found. It was something you built through staying when leaving was easier, through fighting when quitting made sense, through choosing the hard thing because the hard thing was home.
Vandal hat's gesaved, Freunde. Die Vandal hat's gesaved.
Ja, wir haben nichts für Flank, ne? Also einer muss sind. Yes.
Ja, einer bleibt einfach Main, das passt schon. Der Dance Froggo. Let's dance. Okay, wie mache ich die Wand hier so? Ne, ja. Ja. Ich fake mal Main. Ich zieh rum. Habt den.
Los mit der Bucky.
Das ist so ein krankes Timing. Ne? Ich gehe nochmal den Orb, er kommt nochmal rein. Oh mein Gott. Mann.
2 stehen vor Doors.
Was machen wir jetzt? Wisst
Ich
ihr
glaube, von
trotzdem?
hinten ist auch schon gepusht. Also ich habe B-Steps zumindest gehört, offensiv.
Ich hab noch irgendwo eine Waffe.
Nee, nicht.
Ich sehen.
Player standing.